Hello and welcome, everyone. Glad to have you here with us today as we discuss what is the one thing in strategy that no one is talking about. In my opinion, it's dark mouse. Oops, I'm in first drafts. My name is Nandini Nag, and I'm part of the go to market team at Hitachi Vantara. I have been a tech strategist for nearly 15 years now, and my work has taken me all over the world, giving me an opportunity to live and work in 6 countries across 3 continents: Asia, Europe, and North America. Fair to say that as a strategist, I have had my share of first drafts. What do I mean by first draft? Well, we all know about Thomas Alva Edison and the invention of light bulb. But he had 1,000 prototypes before he made that game changing invention. So, in a way, he had 1,000 first drafts. First draft, the essence of first draft is about true innovation that requires a spirit of exploration and a willingness to try something new while giving yourself the permission to fail, but having the persistence and the fortitude to pursue the next breakthrough. In the history of technology, there are numerous examples of such first drafts. Let's look at a couple of them. For example, we all have one of these, a smartphone. But did you know that the first draft was a personal communicator called Simon from a company named IBM? When Simon went on sale in 1994, it had a touch screen and it came with a number of features that we would today call apps. It had email, it had an address book, a sketch pad, a watch. It also had something called a predictor key keyboard. What that did was it looked at the characters that you're typing and then it tried to predict the next 6 possible characters. That sounds like the first draft of autocorrect that we have today. However, after 6 months and about 50,000 units later, Simon disappeared from the market. Let's look at another example. We all have seen one of these, a Tesla. But did you know that the first commercial electric vehicle was Impact from a company called General Motors? According to the Department of Energy, there had been multiple breakthroughs in electric vehicle technology even before GM came on the scene. But what GM created was a battery powered niche car, Impact, that could go from 0 to 50 miles in 7 seconds. It was a concept car with a range of 80 miles. Initially, it was available only in 2 states, Arizona and California, and that too on lease. That was rumored to have annoyed Jay Leno, who was a famous car connoisseur, and he wanted to buy one. Impact had its share of other celebrity fans like Tom Hanks, Mel Gibson. However, in 2002, after producing about 2,500 of these, GM pulled the plug on Impact, citing financial difficulties and high costs. In 2003, GM impounded the remaining prototypes of Impact and actually destroyed them. So the first draft of both of these game changing technologies failed. Now, there are multiple reasons behind it, but let's look at a few of them. For example, these were both concept or niche items far ahead of their time. They had design flaws. For example, Simon the personal communicator had a battery life of 1 hour, while GM's Impact could only go 80 miles on a charge. Pricing was an issue. Simon was priced at $1,100, 900 if you sign a contract with Bell South, but it was still expensive by 1990 standards. Impact, on the other hand, was priced at around 34,000, and even though it was available on lease, it was still about 3 times more expensive than a comparable gasoline-powered car. Another reason was the underlying ecosystem was not well developed. Cell service in the 1990s was decidedly spotty, and and Simon, the personal communicator, was a data hog. The wireless carriers at that time could not keep up with the data requirements of Simon with their 2G, 3G network bandwidth. Similarly, electric vehicle charging stations were few and far between in the late 90s and early 2000s. All of these led to poor customer adoption for these two products. And ultimately, both of them lost management support and work out. So then the question arises, companies like IBM and GM that were at the forefront of innovation, what happens when companies like these have their hand on the first draft of technology, but then they abandon it? Is there a price to pay? I think there is. And although that price is difficult to estimate, we can call it the opportunity cost of abandonment. There's a quote in the March 1997 issue of Car and Driver that sums it up perfectly for both of these products. And it goes something like this, I'm paraphrasing. General Motors' first electric car could not go far on a charge, but it gave us a glimpse of the future. Let's take a look at that future now. If I give you two sets of numbers on market capitalization, one for 2.3 trillion and another for 128 billion, I think you guys can very accurately and easily guess which companies these belong to. And also, moving on, it would come as no surprise to you when I say that the market cap of Apple is 18x that of IBM, which created the first smartphone. Let's look at another set of numbers, this time for two automobile companies. One with a market cap of 700 billion, another with a market cap of 46 billion. Again, you can pretty accurately guess which sets of numbers belongs to which company. And it will also not surprise you to know, moving on, that Tesla is a much more valuable company compared to General Motors, which actually created the first commercial electric vehicle. So the examples that we talked about, they're in the consumer tech domain, but they're in no way unique or one-off, because this has happened in the enterprise tech domain also. This has happened with mobile computing. This has happened with cloud computing. And because history has a way of repeating itself, this will happen again, this time with artificial intelligence. Companies that are investing in artificial intelligence and sticking with it despite the early failures and the high costs are the ones that would get significant competitive advantage over their competitors 10 to 15 years down the line. Because 10 to 15 years down the line, the Fortune 500 list would be dominated by these companies who have mastered artificial intelligence. Now, if you think about IBM and GM, it's not like they did not take good decisions or they did not take sound managerial decisions. They took the best decisions that they could given the circumstances based on the data that they had and the circumstances that they were in. But as the author of Innovator's Dilemma, Clayton Christensen, says, sound managerial decisions often lead to quite other consequences. It can lead to a fall from leadership, which is exactly what happened with IBM and GM, who were at the forefront of innovation at their time. So what can you do? Hindsight is always 2020. But if you come across such a strategic challenge where you have the first draft of a game-changing technology, what would be your options? So let's take a look at what those options might be. I suggest a three-step solution called RRR2S, refine, rewrite, repeat to succeed. What do I mean by that? Let's start with step one, refine. Start with an initial pilot. Work with your sales team to identify customers who would be willing to test your product and give you honest feedback. This can be a free trial, it can be a proof of concept, but what you need is to get an assessment of whether your product is really solving the pain points of the customers. Is it delivering enough value that it entices your customers to buy and use it over and over again? Innovations typically do not deliver short-term results. So when you're asking for those millions of dollars in investments, prepare your management and your investors and set those expectations for the failures, the inevitable failures that would happen from the initial pilot. At the same time, Create the markers on the road. Define the markers, which would be the KPIs and the metrics that would tell you whether you're on the correct trajectory. Create a feedback loop with your customers and integrate the findings that you have gathered from the initial pilot into refining your technology and the product. That is step one. Step two, rewrite the business case. As you're delivering the pilot, you would get a much better idea of how much traction your product would get in the market. Ask yourself these pertinent questions. Is the pricing correct? Remember, both Simon and Impact had pricing challenges. How much would it cost you? How would the cost scale with revenue? When will you break even? What is your route to profitability? When do the economies of scale kick in? Can you accelerate the timeline to profitability? If yes, would it require additional investments? How much? Is there an opportunity cost for abandoning this technology? What would happen if your competitors picked up this technology and then ran with it? How can they be successful? What would they do differently? Use all of these key questions to refine your business case in order to start scaling for your product. Step three, repeat the pilot, but this time go beyond your customers and bring in your partners. Don't do it alone, partner up. The benefit of bringing in partners and having that underlying ecosystem is that it would help your partners evangelize your product. Remember, Impact and Simon both had this challenge that the underlying ecosystem was not well developed at the time when they came out as first drafts. So once you have identified additional use cases and made sure that your partners are also deriving value from your product, your partners would become your evangelists. And finally, don't manage by numbers alone. This is especially true of public companies that live and die by quarterly results. Ben Horowitz, one of the co founders of the iconic Anderson Horowitz firm, has a quote, and I'm paraphrasing. He said, management purely by numbers is like painting by numbers. It's strictly for amateurs. So while it is absolutely important that you set those quantifiable goals and stick to them and manage them, you also need to think about the qualitative aspects of your game changing technology. Because, especially when you're thinking of those groundbreaking technologies, the game changers, the category creators, the qualitative aspects matter much more than just purely the numbers or the quantitative ones. So look beyond the short term numbers to the long term S curve potential of your product, which brings us to the S curve of strategy. We all know that the way to navigate an S curve is to move from one that is plateauing to one that is rising. Much like a surfer, you would have to look for the next wave while riding one. So when you have an opportunity to look at a first draft of a game changing technology, I hope you would have the ability to envision what the final draft would look like. You would have that ability to look beyond the short term numbers to the long term S curve potential, and you would be able to write that S curve to success. And if there's one thing that you take away from the session today, it would be this. It's very easy to find greatness in peaks. But if you're a good innovator and a good strategist, you would be able to find greatness in troughs and valleys. So give a second look to your first draft. Use a different lens to look at the first drafts that have been abandoned by your competitors and see if you can find those nuggets of greatness. Thank you for joining me today.